Welcome back to Learn MoGraph. Today we're going to explore how to create a stunning glass effect using Adobe After Effects. We'll be showcasing 3 different methods to achieve this captivating glass effect, all using built-in After Effects plugins. Our first glass example we're going to take a look at is that sliding glass panel effect that you'll see a lot of times in photo slideshows or like quick cuts of action sports. We're going to use this shot of a guy skateboarding here. He goes up on the quarter pipe, 50-50s across, and goes down. So we're just going to go to the beginning of where he starts his trick here. This is where we're going to begin our glass panel effect. Our first step is going to be drawing a shape layer. So we're going to go to our rectangle tool. We can either press Q on our keyboard or go up to our toolbar. And we're just going to draw out like a tall, narrow rectangle. That looks like it's a good size. We're going to twirl down our rectangle properties. We're going to turn off stroke and turn on fill. It doesn't really matter what color this is because we're going to be turning it into an adjustment layer and we won't really see it anyways. We're going to rename this glass base. And we're going to go over to our toggles and switches. If you don't see those, if you go down over here to the very bottom left of After Effects, you'll see a button here that says expand or collapse the layer switches pane. Just click on that and you should have your options available here. We're going to go to the second to the last option, which is create an adjustment layer. We're going to click that box. And right now that gets rid of our shape layer and it turns it into an adjustment layer. What an adjustment layer does is it takes any effects you apply to it and applies them to all of the layers that are underneath it. So anything we apply to our glass base here is going to affect the footage underneath it. So we're going to add our first effect here, which is a transform effect. We're going to change our scale to something like 110. And just like that, we have our very basic look for glass. I want to turn off our bounding box here so you can see it a little bit better. But the idea is that you have the glass panel that comes across, the light refracts through and slightly alters the image, adding a little bit of a scale to it from what's behind it. You might be satisfied with just this, but we're going to add a couple more effects to make it a little bit more realistic. Our next effect we're going to add is a quick chromatic aberration. And this is a plugin that you can download for free on aescripts.com. I'll leave a link down in the description. You are allowed to donate to it though, which I like to do for plugins like this because it helps with the continued development of this plugin to ensure that it's going to work with all future iterations of After Effects. What I like to change with quick chromatic aberration is change this to red and green and change our position to something like 0.8. And it's a super subtle effect, but what it does is give that slight color shift that you get a lot of times with photography or videography when something's just slightly out of focus. And if we zoom in here and we toggle this on and off, you can see how it's affecting the area around the skateboard and the feet and the legs and any of these hard lines that we have here. I think that looks pretty good. So we're going to zoom back out on our composition. And the next thing we're going to do is add a nice edge to our glass. So we're going to duplicate our glass layer, call it glass edge. We're going to twirl down our shape properties here again. And we're going to turn on stroke and turn off fill. We're going to set our stroke to something like 8, make it a nice thin edge. And you can see right away that gives us that nice definitive glass edge that we have here. And what I also like to do with the glass edge is just change the transform properties and the chromatic aberration properties a little bit because light is going to refract differently through the edge of glass than it is through the middle. So we're going to change this to something like 115, maybe change the rotation to like 2 degrees, and maybe change the position to something like 0.55. And that just gives it that subtle bit of difference compared to the base glass that we have. And to make sure that the edge follows the glass, we're just going to take our pick whip here and parent it to the glass base. And now everywhere that we have our glass base, the edge will follow and you get that nice refracting look going through it. And the next thing we're going to do just to finish off this composition is animate our glass. So we're going to press P on our keyboard for the glass base. We're going to add a keyframe at the beginning of this shot. Move it off the frame. We're going to move forward a bit in our timeline. And we're going to have it come off of the screen on the other side here. So we're going to trim our layers up and just drag our glass pane across. And you can see that gives a nice interesting look as it goes across, especially highlighting the skateboard as it enters back into the quarter pipe here. And we might want to just take our glass pane. If we press W on our keyboard, we can rotate it a little bit, make it more dynamic. And this is starting to look really nice. The cool thing about this effect is that you can stack it. So if we wanted to duplicate our layers here and move them up to the top, and we have our second glass base here, press S on our keyboard, we can shrink in the X-axis on it, and that keeps the edge in proportion with it as well. And if we offset this a little bit, we'll see how when these two pieces of glass kind of overlap each other, you get a doubling of the effect. And you can do this multiple times or as many different shapes as you want to get the desired effect. It's just a cool property to be able to use with adjustment layers and creating this effect. This next glass effect is called Glassmorphism, and this is that UI UX look where it has this frosted panel of glass, and it's semi-transparent. You can see through it, and it adds a little bit of diffusion to anything that goes behind it. This isn't actually creating like a glass look. It's more of a stylistic effect to add depth to a otherwise two-dimensional scene. So to start this, we're going to go up to our rectangle tool. We're going to press and hold on it, and we're going to select rounded rectangle tool. And we're just going to draw out a shape in the middle of our composition here. If we scroll up and down on our scroll wheel, that affects the radius of our corners. I'm just going to scroll until I get something that I like, maybe something right about there. And just like last time, we're going to twirl down our shape options, turn off the stroke, and turn on our fill. And again, we're going to take this and turn it into an adjustment layer. We're also, just for ease of use, going to center up our anchor point using motion and press Command Home on our keyboard to center up our shape within our composition. Now we're going to start adding our effects. So the first effect we're going to add is a fast box blur. And this is going to blur out anything that's going on behind it. So we're going to crank this up to something like 15 and maybe like 30 iterations. Make it nice and soft and diffused. And already we have that nice glassmorphism look where anything that moves behind this has that frosted look to it. Just to take this a little bit further, we're going to zoom in a little bit so you can really see what's going on. We're going to add a noise HLS effect. And we're going to change the noise from uniform to grain. And we're just going to increase our lightness percentage a little bit until it's noticeable. Maybe something like 3. And you can see over here that added that nice sort of frosted look to our glass panel here. If we go back out, you can see how this affects all of the objects behind it. And just like last time, we're also going to add a little bit of an edge to this. Let's just rename this Base Frosted. And we're just going to call this Glass Edge. Again, we're going to twirl down our shape layer, turn on our stroke, turn off our fill, drop our stroke down to something like 8. For this one, I think we're also going to add a fill effect to our stroke, and we're going to change this to white, which is hex code FFFFFF in your color picker. And we're just going to press T on our keyboard and drop the opacity down to something like 10. And it's super subtle, but you can see this does add a nice edge to it. Maybe we'll crank this up to like 35, just so we can see it a little bit better. And again, we're going to parent our edge to our base. And just like that, we have our glassmorphism look. And I think the last thing we want to do is also duplicate our base layer. We're going to delete our effects that are in there. We're going to turn off our adjustment layer effect for it, and we're going to change the color to white. And we're just going to change this to haze. Press T on our keyboard and maybe drop the opacity to something like 10. And that just gives it this slight bloom effect on any shapes that are going behind it, as if light is coming through the frosted glass and wrapping around those objects. And that's a nice simple way to create a Glassmorphism effect in After Effects with just a few simple built-in effects. And now we're going to jump into our last example of creating glass in After Effects, which is creating that textured glass look using a built-in plugin called CC Glass. Our last way of creating glass in After Effects is using the built-in CC Glass effect. And just like our previous examples, we're going to start by creating our shape layer. So we're going to use our rectangle tool. And I think we're just going to cover up about half the frame here and try to create some sort of interesting composition. And we're just going to call this glass. We're going to twirl down our rectangle options, and we're just going to turn off our stroke again. We're going to convert this into an adjustment layer just like before, add our CC Glass effect. And the CC Glass effect works by using a bump map. If you're familiar with 3D animation, you might be familiar with what a bump map is. It's a way of telling After Effects what are the high and low areas of a texture. So the bump map works on dark to light colors, or alpha or red or green. You can set it to basically whatever you want, but I like to work with luminance or lightness. For this example, we're just going to use lightness. And you can feed a layer or a composition into it, and it takes that information and creates the design, the effect that looks like glass. So just adding it to itself, it kind of gives a little bit of that shine, which is something that we achieved with the transform effect, maybe a little bit more intense, but we're going to create our own custom bump map. So for this, I like to just take a pen tool and draw out a stroke going across the top of the frame. Call that bump. We're going to twirl down our shape options here, go to add, going to change this to zigzag. And we're going to change some of our zigzag options here to get kind of a chevron pattern. We're also going to go up here and just turn off the fill because we don't really need that. I think that looks pretty good. Now we're going to go to add a repeater. We're going to change our repeater, go down to our transform. Right now it's repeating in the x-axis. We want to change that to 0, and we want to have it repeat in the y-axis. So we're going to spread these out till it looks about far enough apart, and we're just going to crank up our copies until it covers the entire frame. And if you have a little spot at the top where there's nothing there, you can change your offset to a negative value, and that should fill in that last area there. Alrighty, I'm going to close up our bump options with U on the keyboard, and we're just going to press Command Shift or Control Shift C to pre-compose our layer here. We're going to call it PC Bump Map. And it's very important to begin creating your bump map within your main composition because it needs to be the same aspect ratio as your composition. Otherwise, it's not going to translate properly when After Effects is looking at the bump map. And we can actually poke our eyeball out here and not have the bump map show up at all. Okay, now we can go to our glass, change our bump map from glass to bump map. And just like that, we get our cool glass pattern there. To make it a little bit more subtle and a little bit more realistic looking, we can increase our softness, maybe decrease our height a little bit, so it just has this nice textured pattern to it. We can also mess with the displacement a little bit, maybe bring it down just a tad. And if we want to get the light hitting a different portion of it instead of this top left corner, we can just change the light height, maybe have it come from above, maybe right about there, make it really subtle, change the direction. There we go. Alrighty, now we've created our bump map. Just like before, if you wanted to add an edge, you can duplicate and create a glass edge. We can turn on our stroke again and turn off our fill. And just like before, I like to take our light value here in the CC Glass effect and just change it to add some distinction to the edge of our glass. Maybe we can crank up the intensity a little bit. Give it a nice shot of light over here because we have sun coming from the background there. And the cool thing about adding bump maps and working with CC Glass is you can also animate them. So if we go into our bump map composition, we change this and we hide our bump layer, we can create a background color, a background solid, and we're going to add fractal noise. I like to change this to dynamic and spline. Really crank up my contrast, change the complexity down to something like 1, and crank up the brightness a little bit. We're also going to go to transform and increase the scale just a little bit. Now we're going to go press home on our keyboard, go to the beginning of the composition, set a keyframe for evolution, go to the end of the composition, change this to maybe 2, and we're going to twirl down our evolution options and make sure cycle evolution is checked. So now within those 2 keyframes, it cycles 2 full times. And the cool thing about this is if we go back to our main composition and we go down to our glass here, we can crank up the height and we can lower the softness a little bit. And it gives us this really cool rippling water effect, which could be really cool if you're trying to create an effect where somebody's looking up through water or if there's some sort of glass portal that they're going through. And this concludes our 3 different ways to create glass in After Effects. I'm going to create some effect presets for these and put them up on learnmograph.com where you can download them. I'll also put these project files up there so you can open them up and take a look around, copy them over to your projects if you'd like. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and be sure to comment if you have any questions or if you have any requests of things that you want to see in the future.